And now I would like to welcome Shirish. He's waiting already. Shall we start the online lab in English, Shirish?
Yep, great. Thank you very much, Vera. If you'd be able to share my slides, great. Thank you. So yeah, thank you very much to the EJC for inviting me. And I'm really glad to be here talking to you about why news storytelling is broken and how we can fix it. And some people have said to me, oh, that's quite a provocative title. But actually, when you think about it, which metrics are we really succeeding on? Which metrics are we really winning on? And I really want to focus, because the focus of this summit is audience first. Essentially, what I'm going to be talking about is how much of our day-to-day journalism is completely failing at even the most basic level, and that is at communicating useful information to our audience. And that's because I think we're so tied up in the habits of journalism that often we're forgetting about what journalism is really there for. But the good thing is we can change that. It just takes a change of mindset that starts with reminding ourselves why we do journalism, and that we're making it for our readers, viewers, and listeners, not just for ourselves. So just quickly, to give you an idea of who I am, I've been a journalist for 25 years and worked in every major broadcast newsroom in the UK. I've been freelance for the last 6 years or so, largely focusing on investigations. And for the last year or so, I've also been researching news storytelling as part of the Creative Cluster programme here in South Wales, where I live. And that's the basis of what I'm going to be talking about in the next hour or so. I also work at the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, which some of you may have heard of, as a community organiser in the Bureau local team there, rather than as a journalist. I'm also going to be talking a little bit about how engaged journalism, what we do at Bureau Local, plays into this. But hopefully all of that experience has given me a pretty thorough understanding of journalism and the way it works in the early 21st century. So we're going to start by looking at just how broken journalism is. We're going to look at what we think stories are and why we need them. We're going to think, for a change, I think, about what citizens, and I use that word citizens very deliberately, want and need from journalism, and how we make news for and with them, rather than just for other journalists. And then finally, we're going to talk about what the future of journalism looks like. And for me, that's remembering we're part of a wider community, and indeed communities, expressing care for each other and our audiences, but also leveraging the power of artificial intelligence to produce more and better news at scale. So let's start with the problem, how journalism is broken. So right now, you don't need me to tell you this. Journalism faces a whole bunch of existential problems, but I'm going to address 3 key issues here. Firstly, we have a huge and growing problem with trust. The recent Reuters digital news report found that in the UK, just 28% of people say they can trust most news most of the time, and only 39% trust even the news they use. So those figures are pretty similar, of course, across much of Europe and indeed the world. But that should be absolutely horrifying to us, that not even half of the people that trust even the news that they use. Secondly, young people aren't engaging with that news that much. We talked about that a little bit in the sessions this morning. When they do, they're largely not engaging with traditional news brands. So how can we engage young people with reputable sources of news? I don't think of that because they're young people and they need some kind of talking down to, or kind of what we sometimes call youth news. What I mean is because they're just, frankly, the old people of the future, and they are the audience of the future. Finally, we have a fundamental problem of inclusion. And let me put this very clearly. There is racism in our newsrooms, and those racist viewpoints, the supremacy of the white gaze, then infects everything about our discourse in society. Put simply, if people of colour were driving editorial decisions in newsrooms, then all our discussions about immigration, inequality, education, crime, everything would be entirely different. So we need to recognize that and address it. So it's not just about telling stories differently, it's about telling different stories. And that is a fundamental change we need to make. So I want to talk about stories too, because it's really important to understand that we're hardwired for stories as human beings. To give you a really clear example of just how and why that is, I'm going to quickly play you this video of an experiment from the 1940s. It's called the Hyde-Assimila experiment. It's only a minute or so long. There's no audio. I just want you to have a watch and see what you think. And feel free to pop in the chat what you think. Are you starting to see emotions, motivations, characters even? See some drama here, I think. Some jeopardy, some fear, some anger. Okay, so most of us see a story, right? And that tells us that our brains create stories even when objectively they aren't really there. This isn't just random. There's a reason that we're hardwired for stories. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But also, let me just first show you this, which asks an important question about the way we tell news stories. So, this is just the Hyde-Assimila experiment backwards. Yeah, someone's saying it looks like a film plot. So I've just reversed this. And have a think about what changes about your response to it. So I'm not going to play the whole thing back. I'm just going to pause it here because I think we know what that's telling us. So the important thing about this isn't that because it's backwards, you can't make out a story. It's actually that when this story is told backwards, it's actually a different story. Now think about how we write our news stories, the day-to-day kind of stories that you see on the BBC website in the UK or the ITV News website, the Sky News website. Essentially, they're written backwards, what's sometimes called the inverted pyramid. So if you think about the Hyde-Assimila experiment, we get a different story if we play that backwards. So maybe we actually get a different story when we read a standard day-to-day news story that's written backwards. So the kind of rather prosaic reason why we use this inverted pyramid structure is the Telegraph. It was the original newswire because it was expensive and unreliable, so it made sense to put as much information as possible at the beginning, just in case you lost the end of it. So we don't use the Telegraph anymore. That's gone, obviously. But the habits, remember I talked about that at the beginning, the habits formed by that technology still define journalism. So given that our communications technology has completely transformed several times since the Telegraph, it's ludicrous that our way of telling news stories really hasn't. So we're hardwired for stories in that linear way because they're a virtual reality simulator to help us navigate the world. If you're a caveman or a cavewoman, how do you teach your child not to hang around outside when mammoths are around. You tell them about that time a mammoth ate a cave baby, or you update it to fairy tales, Hansel and Gretel, or you update it to monsters behind the sofa. Either way, you want your children to be careful and keep themselves safe, and you do that by telling them stories. That's why there are that virtual reality simulator. So as we've seen, stories are part of our evolution, and we're hardwired for them. Even if stories don't exist, we create them. So as Jonathan Gottschall says in his fascinating book, The Storytelling Animal, which I really recommend, we are as a species addicted to story. Even when the body goes to sleep, the mind stays up all night telling itself stories. So as part of my research, I had the pleasure of talking to Jonathan on a couple of occasions. And what those conversations really reinforced for me was that if we want our news stories to connect and engage our audiences, surely we have to engage that natural yearning for stories that's just a fundamental part of us. Our dreams aren't written in inverted pyramid style, so why are our news stories? So, as well as that fundamental idea about how we use narrative, my research identified 6 key principles for a new way of doing journalism. Now, these aren't the rules, because I don't think we should have rules. In a way, that's part of the problem. These are hopefully to just stimulate debate around some fundamentals of journalism that I think we don't ask enough questions about right now. And I'm going to leave plenty of time at the end just so we can start having that discussion right here today. So in my research, I spoke to lots of people, citizens, of course, mainly young people from ethnic minorities, actually, but also game designers, comedians, puppeteers, theatre directors, storytellers of all kinds, really, to try to figure out what it is about stories that helps them really connect. So from that work, I synthesized kind of 6 key principles to consider when we're doing our journalism. So the first one is content. Is the content we produce actually the most useful or valid to users? For example, when we cover the budget here in the UK, we always think we're terribly clever because the interactive content is always presented in terms of you will be £150 a year better off as a result of the budget. Now, frankly, that is not journalism. It's actually, in some way, a political statement that says a low tax, small state government is good for us per se. Now, that's not true for a number of reasons, but at a very basic level, well-being isn't measured solely in monetary terms. And it also tells nothing about what our taxes are being spent on. Maybe people want to spend more money on health or education or defense, for example. Maybe they personally want to be worse off if those services are better. So we need to do better at illustrating the trade-offs that lie behind those figures. So we pretend as journalists to be objective, but there is nothing objective about that. And it's the assumption that it is that's driving so much of what's wrong with our journalism, and then by extension, our discourse. So what can we do that's actually more valid and tells people what they want and need to know? I'm going to talk here a bit about crime journalism as well. So much of what we do is crime, but why do we do so much individual crime? If we're not talking about anything systemic, what are these things really telling us about the world? And are they even presenting a realistic picture of the world, or a kind of an over frightening picture of the world, which then doesn't allow us to have a rational debate about crime, punishment, what happens in jails, our whole criminal justice system? The whole debate is skewed by the way we do crime journalism. So we need to think, I think, more deeply about that. I then want to talk about context, because what my research really brought home to me was how much audiences are crying out for context. Now, On the Day news hugely prioritizes breaking or at least moving events, but very often to the detriment of context analysis, or understanding. So I really recommend Philip Pullman's book about storytelling. Many of you will know him as the author of the His Dark Materials series. So his book is called Demon Voices. And in it, Pullman talks about how he never uses the present tense because all it offers is a vertical slice through a horizontal life, like looking through vertical blinds and never getting that full picture. So how do we provide that longer, longitudinal context for users where they can really understand the full scope of a story? I'm going to talk also about agency. So when I talk about agency, I mean both on the input side and the output side. So we need to offer a way in which people feel like they're involved in the world and can make a difference. News isn't just happening to us as passive kind of victims of the news. We're all citizens of our communities and have our own power. So we need to give our users agency and let them also be authors of solutions and not just victims of problems. So rather than just asking vox pops, rail fares are going up, is that good or bad? Where everyone clearly says that's bad. Maybe we ask them how the rail system could be better organized. And again, it goes back to that budget question. Maybe people want to spend more if they know that it's actually going to pay for investment or to make their services better. So also, I want to talk about, is there a way we can express our agency, our curiosity, our choices as to how we read or watch our journalism? Again, curiosity in that evolutionary sense is something we're hardwired for. So we should be working with that, right? So the tone of voice we use is also horribly old-fashioned and formulaic. All I have to say on this is I ran a workshop with a group of young people of colour and watched a BBC News bulletin with them. And frankly, it was just plain embarrassing. Sitting there with 20 young people and seeing how quickly they were turned off by the content was quite something. So we need to find a different way of talking to people. Again, much of that language we use is just habits which we've transferred to the newspapers to an entirely different medium, and it makes no sense. I'm going to talk again about diversity. As I said earlier, innovation in storytelling isn't just about telling stories differently, it's about telling different stories. And you don't get that if you don't listen to different perspectives and really hear them and reflect them. And that goes for gender, race, disability, sexuality, everything. I don't want to hear more warm words and zero action from those middle-aged, middle-class white men who still define much of what we do. I want to see real change, and I want to see it now. And finally on this, transparency. This speaks to that existential problem we talked about earlier of trust. We have to be transparent, and we need to be clear about what we're reporting, how we're getting the information, and acknowledge the gaps in our knowledge where they exist. Sometimes we have to say, we don't know, rather than saying something we don't know just to fill the space. Because if we don't, then people start to fill in those gaps and they see conspiracy where there isn't. And that's how we get, frankly, to where we are right now, which largely is not a good place. So to sum all that up, I came up with an overall aim for journalism, that it should be about orientation. By that I mean, consuming news should help us understand the world, locate us in our environment, and help us understand and meaningfully interact with it. Ultimately, it should help us form a view which is consistent with our own personal and community interests and needs. Now that all sounds obvious, but when you look at the journalism that actually exists in the world, very little of it actually achieves those aims. So now talk is cheap, and it's really lovely to have had all those interesting conversations and have big thoughts, but it means nothing if I'm not making practical change. So as a result of all that work, I built 7 prototypes which incorporated some or all of those principles I've just outlined. And I tested the most interesting of them on more than 1,200 people. So we've got some really robust and useful results. So it's probably going to help to show you, in screenshot form at least, a couple of those prototypes. But what I'd say is, before I do that, as we've discussed, people sometimes get hung up on the format and think that's the innovation, that's the shiny thing. But what we're actually trying to change and test here is the underlying journalism and rethinking that. So I think what I want to encourage you to is really focus on that. So all the prototypes I made were about the same story, the proposed HS2 rail line here in the UK. And you can see that we branded them as BBC Stories, so we could basically remove the brand variable when we were testing. So to start with, I simply asked myself, as a citizen, what do I need to know? So we call this prototype the narrative accordion, because fundamentally it's a linear narrative, but it's split up into questions and answers, which you can either read from top to bottom or just in the order you want. It's linear. It gives the user a sense of agency, a chance to express their curiosity in the way it takes them, but actually provides a lot of useful information. One other thing you'll note is that, I'll just play again for you, is there's no politics. That's largely because you don't need it. It doesn't help us understand the story better, and actually is often confusing. We don't get any of that Conservatives say this, Labour say that, whatever. So going back to the Reuters Institute report, people believe that by far the greatest source of disinformation was domestic politicians. So if we don't need it, why bother? Why are we inserting that risk to trust? Largely just because of habit. So when we did the testing, too much politics was also one of the key things that came out of our survey as a turn-off for users. So why put it in when we don't need it? It's just another thing that we largely do out of habit. But for most stories, nobody in the real world, our actual citizens, want or need it. In another of the prototypes, what we call the contextual timeline, we're addressing directly that user need for greater context, more focus on the broad sweep of a story, and a deprioritization of the kind of breaking aspect of a complex story. So timelines aren't new, but I think what's interesting here is the scope of our timeline. You can see in a second, we actually start here with the introduction of Japanese high-speed rail. So we're going back almost 60 years here, because a big aspect of the HS2 story is frankly how terrible the UK is at high-speed rail. It's not some brand new invention. And what we then do is we actually look into the future to give a broad outline of what's likely to happen next with the story. So some people will say this isn't strictly news, but if we go back to that principle of orientation, I think having some sense of a future timeline is really important. It highlights that even if things go smoothly, which frankly they won't, then HS2 won't even be finished for another 20 years. And that helps us make decisions about whether we think it's a good idea or not, or whether we think, frankly, I, living in Wales, who get pretty much zero benefit from it, should really be paying for it, for example. So the results of our research with these prototypes were really striking. So we first looked at the idea of knowledge transfer, what should be just a really core aim of journalism. How much information did users pick up from reading the story? So what was really striking again was how well the narrative accordion did, miles ahead of the other articles. It did particularly well with everyone under 35, with that knowledge transfer being around a third higher than the BBC story, but in half the time. And in fact, the BBC article was twice as long, but provided less information. And that's clearly a really important result if we're interested at all in getting younger audiences. But it's true for all audiences. In fact, it's a universal solution. Getting more knowledge in less time in a format that people like has to be a huge win. When we asked how interesting or enjoyable the articles were and what users thought of the language, layout, tone, format, and navigation, our prototypes did really well. The original BBC article came in the bottom 2 on all of those measures. And that's really important because if people don't find your article enjoyable or interesting, then they're simply not going to come to your website in the first place. On the other hand, the narrative accordion, which we looked at a bit earlier, did really well, coming top in most of those categories and in the top 2 in all of them. So when we asked users if comparing against what's currently available to them here in the UK, they found the prototypes more engaging, more informative, more interesting, more relatable, more useful, or more user-friendly. We then calculated a net approval rating. So basically, if 50% of people thought they were better and 20% of people thought they were worse, you got a net approval rating of 30. So if you have a look at these results, they are big, big numbers. So overall, the narrative accordion, the prototype we looked at a bit earlier with the expandable and collapsible questions, is the most consistently good with really solid approval ratings. The contextual timeline does pretty well, but it's actually designed for a very specific question, which isn't really being asked here. Look, though, at the results for engaging. So this is kind of top right for the plain text dramatic prototype. So that was a version we wrote, which was just a linear narrative, but attempting, frankly, quite badly to cast it in a sort of 3-act traditional dramatic structure. Now, that's the biggest number by far. So I genuinely think that that is just people enjoying a straightforward linear structure which starts at the beginning and ends at the end. So you could all just implement that in your newsrooms tomorrow, today, at no cost, and be engaging vastly more people. So remember, that is a positive approval rating. So that's something like 70% of people thinking it's better than what they currently have, and 20% of people thinking it's worse or they don't enjoy them. So those are huge numbers. So these all do well on being informative and useful, which is, of course, the bedrock of journalism. But that actually means very little if people don't enjoy and they aren't engaged with your work. So what we've done here is shown that all of that is possible. Finally, with the contextual timeline and the narrative accordion, we asked if the layout and navigation made it more convenient, more engaging, or helped them understand the story better than other options currently available to them. So on both of those measures, again, these are astonishing results. If we just look at the narrative accordion, 83% of people said the format made it more convenient, 79% said it made the experience more engaging, and 75% of people said it helped them understand the story better. Now, as I said, that doesn't take any investment, doesn't take any more resource. In fact, most of our stories were only half as long as the BBC story they're based on. And because the starting point is just a set of questions, they're actually easier to write than a normal web or app story. So this way of doing stories is much easier to do, but still achieves far greater engagement and better, faster knowledge transfer. And that, to me, is an absolute no-brainer. So building on that, I want to talk about what the future of storytelling looks like, and indeed journalism. So for me, that's the citizen-focused journalism we've been talking about, built with community in mind, but also using technology to drive what we do to make it hopefully bigger and better. So some of you will have heard of the Bureau of Investigative Journalism here in the UK. Well, we have a team there called the Bureau Local, which is focused on engaged journalism. And I work there part-time as a community organizer. So my whole job is essentially to facilitate a community who mostly aren't journalists to carry out acts of journalism, as we describe it. So on that theme, I'm going to ask you a very quick question to think about, although it's a really important one. Why do we think readers or viewers engage with our work? What is it that drives them to connect with us? So I'm going to pop up a slide here, which is from an organization called Hearken, which some of you will have heard of, who focus on community engagement tools. So they say the key motivators are vulnerability or pain. That's a desire to have an immediate need met. Curiosity, a desire to learn. Connection, a desire to belong. Serving others, so that's a desire to help another person, which traditional journalism doesn't really engage with. And finally, what we've been talking about throughout, storytelling, a desire to be heard or hear the tales of lived experiences others. So as we've talked about, lots of how we think in our industry is focused on journalism and journalists. For example, when people talk about how they get users to pay for content, that discussion is largely focused on what sort of person would pay for journalism, what do we need to target? So shouldn't we be starting more from the point of view of why should they pay for journalism? What are we offering that they would want? What do they need that we can help provide? What we've got on this slide, essentially basic human needs that we should be thinking about fulfilling. And if we start from the point of view, as I do, that we have to think of journalism as a service, we need to think better about how we fulfill some of those basic human needs. And why? Well, it's about trust. It's what we kind of keep coming back to. This is the biggest problem facing journalism, and deep engagement and sharing a space with citizens is the answer to that. So people talk forever in articles and at conferences like this about building long-term relationships with communities and investing for the long term to build trust. And you know what? Nobody ever does it. So we can carry on not doing that until our industry dies and nobody believes a word we say, and then we'll wish we had done it. So we can't leave this until it's too late. And I say no one does it. There are lots of great community-focused journalism organizations which are doing it, but it's not the mainstream right now, and it really needs to be. So you may think that lots of this stuff around community is very kind of touchy-feely, yoga pants, namaste stuff, but I'm also really hard-nosed about the future. So let's not beat around the bush here. AI and natural language generation technology can already write many, many stories more quickly and more accurately than us humans. So I actually welcome that, because lots of journalism we do is really boring, but also time consuming. So what's the future for journalists? Well, very soon, AI will get very good at writing stories, but what our computers are not very good at is engagement and deep connection. So Chelsea Herring from Harkin puts it beautifully when she says, humans still win at the game of intimacy, care, and mutual support, and we will for a long time to come. Intimacy, care, and mutual support are our killer app, our USP. So let's start leveraging that. So that's my vision for the future of journalism. And I've actually just got some new funding to look at how we can overlay those storytelling techniques using AI. But basically what it is journalists providing the human qualities, the connection, the engagement, working alongside AI and NLG to produce better, richer, more connected journalism. And even though it might be automated, it should build on those organic storytelling structures that we've built up over 3,000 years to create more useful, informative, personalized, fact-based content that give users what they want and need. Now, that's just one vision, and you can agree or disagree with it, of course, but I think we can agree that what we're doing right now isn't working. So we can't just sit here whining about it and then go and do exactly the same thing we always have. We need to try something different. So thank you. And yeah, I really looking forward to starting the discussion.
Thank you so much for this session, Shirish. Really, really interesting research about news storytelling. We just shared actually in the live chat an article that you wrote on Medium, so that people can follow more about the research. Actually, we have here a question from BC who asks if the study is going to be published.
Sure. So actually, as you said, the Medium article really covers a lot of the practical stuff for journalists. But I'm actually just now writing a journal article which goes into the real in-depth stuff on the results of the research as well. So you can see all that work. So I'm working on that now, which hopefully will be published in an academic journal soon, depending on whether people like it or not. But I think we've seen just how striking the results were, and much more striking even than I imagined in my wildest dreams. So yeah, do follow me on Medium or on Twitter or whatever, because I've written like a whole bunch of articles actually at various stages during the research. We just look at specific aspects of that research process, which hopefully should give you a really good idea of all the things I learned as part of that process.
Great. Thank you very much. We also have somebody here, Craig E., asking if people will be willing to read AI written stories.
So people are already doing it. So it's already out there in the world. I spoke to a company called United Robots recently who are doing this. The Press Association here in the UK works with a company called Radar, who are already writing thousands of stories and actually providing better content than humans can do, because they're focusing this stuff on the local impact of stories. So they're using data to provide locally focused stories at much greater scale than humans can do. So people are already doing it. That work is going to get better. But what I'm looking at doing is how can we use some of these organic storytelling techniques to enrich that AI storytelling. And I think the important thing to note is that obviously one of the key findings was just that linear technique works much better. And actually that is much easier for AI technology to write than our inverted pyramid structure, because it's backwards. It's much easier to write a story forwards than it is backwards. So it's already happening, but what we want is to try and make that as human. I think that's what the question is really getting at, to try and make that more human. And I think everyone wants to do that. Everyone wants to make them as good as possible. But actually there are things we can do. So where people are finding real value is they're driving engagement by using AI to do basic run-of-the-mill stories, and then going off and spending much more time writing much more engaging features, which are driving engagement with users. So I think that's really important.
That's great. And we have another question from Rhiannon Davis. I'm going to share it on screen about the prototype. So what were the other prototypes you used? How many were there? Any other that had interesting impacts that you did not include in today's discussion?
Yeah, so the reason we tested 4, so we made 7 prototypes and we tested 4 just because we wanted to get the most responses as possible, to make the results as kind of robust as possible. And we didn't test what were necessarily the best ones. We tested the ones which had the widest possible range of approaches. So one of them was actually a video, which was a bit like something you might see on The Daily Show or Patriot Act with Hasan Minhaj, which some of you may have seen on Netflix. So kind of a light-hearted take on journalism. And that did really well on just engagement and being relatable. And so some people may think that sort of thing is going to work better for younger audiences or audiences who aren't so engaged with the day-to-day news. So actually, we have to remember that most people aren't watching news 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's why that context is really important, because we have to give people entry points to news. But the problem with the video approach is it just takes time and resource much more than some of the text-based stuff. The other thing, talking about that Radar PA thing in the UK, is we did one on local impacts of the story. So we did local impacts of HS2. So for example, for me in South Wales, I pay for HS2, but get pretty much zero benefit from it. Whereas in North Wales, because it speeds up travel time to the north of the UK, actually there was some benefit to people in North Wales. So we did separate impacts in North and South Wales. And that was really popular, actually. We didn't test it fully, but amongst people we kind of tried it out on, that was really popular. And again, I think that also links with that kind of engaged journalism kind of stuff we were talking about, that we are working with smaller local communities to provide them with the news they need and they want. And that also gets back to that concept of orientation, because what I think is we should be empowered. Empowered is not right, because we have the power anyway, but we should be given information that helps us make a choice or a decision on whether something is good or bad, which does actually align with our own community and personal interests. And actually, I think probably Brexit is a good example of that, where actually a lot of people were ultimately, because of the failure of journalism, largely, weren't given the information that helped them make a decision that actually did align often with their own interests and needs. I don't mind if people disagree and they choose things, if people on the right wing choose one thing because it makes them richer, blah, blah, blah. I don't mind if people do that, as long as that actually makes sense for their own community interests and needs. And similarly, if people on the left make choices that are, aligned with their needs, that's great. But actually, largely, people haven't been doing that because they haven't had the kind of information that helps them make those choices because of the old-fashioned habits that journalism has got into. And I'm not kind of pointing the finger at anyone, because I did it for 25 years. I was part of that system which was doing that. So, I'm equally culpable, but I think it is time to stop and think. And I think a good point is that I came to this summit last year, and that was the first journalism conference I'd ever been to. Because actually, largely in journalism, they're thought of as kind of self-indulgent and a waste of time. And I would like to go, guys, we are facing a crisis. We're not going to get out of that crisis by just carrying on without reflecting on what we're doing and asking really deep, fundamental questions about what we're doing.
Thank you so much, Shirish. Indeed, that's where we met last year in person. Yeah, different times. And without the pandemic around, we were able to have our events in person. But right now, we have another interesting question here from Lee Zhe-Yong, who asks, how have decision makers, namely newspaper editors, of course, responded to your points? Are there any success stories of newspapers or other media adopting these techniques?
Sure. So actually, when we first kind of announced the results of this research, we had a big sharing session, which that Medium article is essentially the script from. And we did get quite a lot of leaders from news media come along to that. I haven't seen so much of it being implemented yet. And, that is for people to decide on whether they take. Where I have seen it actually is it's starting to, and I won't take all the credit for this, but that narrative accordion style, you will start to see in BBC News web articles. They've done some slightly different stuff around it, but essentially the style is very similar. A series of questions which you can expand or collapse. So like I say, I'm not going to take the credit, but it is starting to happen. And ultimately, I don't want to take credit. I want to be part of people, having those fundamental questions and rethinking what we do. But what I would say is, if you're running a news organization and you're prepared to look at results where 75% of people say the format and the way of storytelling helps them understand the story better, and you're just going to carry on doing what you've always done, then there may be no helping you, because we can only provide the information, the evidence, and like I said, it was really important to me to do that testing, because it's very, very easy to just have big thoughts and write a nice article and kind of make a living doing the conference circuit on that. But I wanted to have very, very robust results, the kind which could be in an academic journal article, because then, like I say, at that point, then if people don't choose to think about that, then, like I say, there is no helping. There may be no helping people. So yeah, we can only provide the evidence. And like I say, I don't want these to be rules. I want people to ask the questions, because I've finessed these principles even since the end of the research, because I've thought about it more and it's changed my views, and I've added much more on transparency, for example. So yeah, I think, I'm very, very happy and very interested to work with news organizations, particularly in this next phase of research on kind of implementing this AI stuff, because I really believe we can do more and better. And again, to me, that's a no-brainer. If we can do more journalism that's better, that our citizens find more useful, more engaging, and provides them with more information, again, to me, it's a no-brainer. So yeah, feel free to get in contact, and I'm happy to work with anyone and everyone on that.
That's great. We do have people in the live chat saying that they will reach out to you after this presentation. And Elizabeth actually is asking another question that may be a bit of a follow-up after Z's question. So how do you make leaders change their minds? It's not easy to convince leadership to change old formats and habits in newsmaking, in news storytelling.
Yeah. So I hope in some way I answered that question with the data. Like the data to me is the key thing. If I didn't have that, then I think it's understandable if people just think that's a big idea. I suppose I want to ask them a different question, or kind of bring up a different point in a way as well. So much of our innovation in journalism is a journalist making something, showing that to another journalist, saying, that looks nice. The other journalist saying, yeah, that looks nice. And that apparently is innovation. Now, that isn't innovation. That is just journalists doing what makes them happy. And I think when I started this research project, when we had the original title, doing innovative ways of news storytelling, I think largely what people wanted me to do was come up with some kind of non-linear branching narrative that was kind of choose your own adventure, because that's very trendy in journalism innovation right now. But actually, which of our users is going to engage with that? And is that actually going to provide useful information? There are users who are going to do that, but it's a very, very small subset. And it became very clear to me that what we needed to do was engage with as many people as possible. And in fact, people who aren't engaging with news right now, because we're not going to survive on the kind of essentially the elderly readership of our news right now, because they are literally going to die. And then what will we be left with? So I think we need to be, and that's not just young people, it's older people who aren't engaging with news right now as well, by providing something that's useful. So this has to all come back to not doing what makes us happy, but it's actually what provides something for users. And a supplemental point to that, in terms of changing news leaders' minds, and it's something that has come up a lot in other conversations I've been having around diversity, I suppose we could call it broadly. A lot of you I know will have come to an event we ran at the Bureau of Investigative Journalism recently, which was very plainly, and called as such, confronting journalism's role in systemic racism. And our problem, as I discussed, is essentially the organizations we work in are largely run by white, male, middle-class, metropolitan people who don't want to change, because right now the system that they know privileges them. And if we want to change, there are lots of warm words about, we want to hear diverse voices. There is very little action. And there won't be action until people actually are held accountable. And some of that is going to mean sharing power. And I would really encourage all of us to get involved in that process of accountability to share power. Because ultimately, I was really struck at the beginning of my research by an article by Rasmus Nielsen from the Reuters Institute, where he talked about the vanguards and rearguards. And the rearguards are those white, male, middle-class people. The system, that white gaze, privileges them because they understand it. The vanguards, people wanting to change, is women and people of color who have different perspectives, who think about immigration differently, who think about inequality differently, who think about the way debt impacts disproportionately on women. And actually, those are the voices we need to hear right now because they reflect much more of the world than those white middle-class men living in capital cities. So, that is a big process. But, we do have to make that change for all of this to happen.
Thanks so much for that, Shirish. If I may, there are people commenting your session as well on Twitter. So I would like to recover a comment that mentions this person was following. We still have some time. So this person was following and says at some point, it's you mentioned people don't trust media and the media don't engage enough with the younger generation. And some suggestions or solutions for this would be indeed to think about diversity and agency as just mentioned. And Claudio actually mentions that he has seen some editorial projects on Instagram. So a platform that we discussed this morning at the summit can also cater to younger audiences. And he thinks these projects on Instagram actually apply more of these ideas around diversity and agency. So I was wondering if you have a comment about that.
Yeah. No, I do, and that's good. And I think that is largely driven by much more of a kind of user or citizen focus in those platforms. Although what I would say, and I think this is true of merit, and I'm sure what Claudia is describing is very good and is incorporating a lot of it. But I would say, and it gets back to what innovation is that lots of particularly larger mainstream organizations, they think just being on Instagram or Quibi or whatever is the innovation. And it is not the innovation. Actually, we have to still rethink the underlying journalism. The platform is not the innovation. If we're just doing the same thing on a different platform, that for me isn't innovation. We have to do different things. Well, we have to fundamentally change the journalism on all the platforms. And what I think about that is it's almost like you're building a house, but you put, a 100,000 euro kitchen in the house before you put the roof on it. You have to get the foundations and the structure right before you do all the fancy stuff. And so I'm sure what Claudia is describing is that more fundamental change, but I do want to reinforce that, just being on a different platform or just having a different format is not innovation if you're not doing that really fundamental thinking about, is this actually useful?
That's great. Thank you so much. Indeed, it's about asking the difficult questions, the fundamental questions in journalism, perhaps stepping back a little bit and rethink everything that is being done without a doubt. We have a lot of people thanking you for sharing your presentation. And here we have a comment from somebody who is tape ghosts on YouTube. Let me recover some more. Another comment from Sue as well. And and people, please.
Sorry,
share it.
what I'd add to Sue's point, and I would discuss, I'd like to have discussed it more anyway, but we can't cover everything, is actually a lot of this we can do also by co-creation and sharing the space with citizens. I think we've got to get away from, again, that old-fashioned idea that journalists are experts. And actually, that's where we get a lot of that having to pretend we know everything, the transparency point I make, when we really don't. And that comes from that thing of journalists being experts. Largely, we're not. And actually, citizens, by experience or whatever, are experts. And we need to do more of that co-creation and sharing the space, because that also deals with that issue of trust. Because the more people that are kind of involved in the process, the more they have to trust the process because they're part of it. It's actually this sort of differentiation between journalists and citizens that is a big part of the problem, I think.
This is fascinating. Thank you so much, Shirish. And I would like to mention as a final note, because we are our time has arrived to its end now, that the topic of diversity, gender representation, gender balance in content, in newsrooms is going to be transversal to a lot of the sessions in the program of the News Impact Summit on Audience. So yeah, I invite everyone to take another look at the program and join specifically those sessions if that's something that you're really interested in learning about and discussing with our speakers. Very good. So I don't know if you have any last notes, Shirish. If not, we can say our goodbyes for today.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining, for asking the questions, for all the nice comments.